Welcome, everybody, and I want to first thank Jill and the team at the Lowe for this opportunity to share Cities of the Mind with everyone. After working on this exhibit and working with Carlos and his wife Amaryllis, I really want to thank them too, because this is a great opportunity for me. I also had the honor of curating his 25-year retrospective at the Tucson Museum of Art last year, and of course this exhibit, Cities of the Mind, as well. So we've had a lot of fun times together, and I think that you know, or you probably wouldn't be here if you didn't know this, that Carlos Estévez is one of the most brilliant artists. His work is so interesting. He really does make us think. And so what we're going to do tonight is we're going to go through a series of beautiful slides from the exhibit. And the slides have been combined with other slides that are inspirational to what he did to create these very monumental and complex works of art. So could we start with the first slide? So, Carlos, I think I'd like to start by asking you about the title of the exhibit and how, when we look at the slides of your work, they relate to some of the slides that are inspirational on the other side of the screen that you can identify for us, because I think it really does bring a lot of information to these works. So let's talk about the idea of the visions, this external vision of the inner world, and how your background in Havana enters into this particular picture.
All right. Okay, so I guess it's my turn. Well, before start, I have to thank everybody that put this all together, the team that made this conversation possible. Of course, I have to thank you, Jill, and the amazing team of the Lowe Museum. There's a lot of credit to give in this show because I just made the paintings, but you people do everything else, and especially you, Carl. I'm so grateful from you that you've been on my side since I've been to the United States, and we've been in a lot of adventures, our adventures together. And this show particularly is very special for me. And you were asking about the idea of the show and the idea of the title, and I have to give you the credit that it was you who gave the title of the show. And also it was you. It was you who you were the first person who saw the first painting, because you've been involved to my work since very long and so close. And actually, you know, the creation process is not precisely a conceptual or a theoretical process. And I have in my mind the first time that you came to my studio and I showed you the painting, I didn't know, I wasn't very oriented. It was not a project yet, and you just say, wow. So that expression on your face, it validates. I told myself, I am in the right path. So thank you, Carl, very much for this special support to my show. So you were the one who gave the title, and I think it's a perfect title because it describes perfectly what I was doing and what is the show about. I want to tell very briefly about the concept of the show. I was born in Cuba, in Old Havana. Old Havana is a very special place. It's a historic place. And at some point in my life, I asked myself why I am so fascinated for ancient cultures, for medieval history, for medieval art. My first answer, my first theory about this, it was the reincarnation. I thought I was like a monk. In my previous life, I was a monk doing illuminated manuscript. But when I grow older, I realized that was my childhood. That was my playground. Old Havana is a place with palaces, fortress. So this is was my where my childhood developed. That was the play where I play with my friends. So that's why my connection with this old city is old Havana is a walled city with a lot of history, a lot of church, the cathedral, palaces, fortress, and a very important element of uh, my time in Cuba is precisely the concept of time. Cuba is an island, it's surrounded by sea, but also politically is isolated place because you know in Cuba there is a totalitarian regime and people don't have the possibility to go abroad easily. So there is a uh, very special and complex concept of time in Cuba. That's why I started from the very young age to observing the relationship between the city and the people, how the city contains architecturally, the ambience contain a lot of information about what we are as a human. So psychologically, first you have the time to be with yourself because in an island like Cuba, time pass very slow. So it's an opportunity. It's like a forced opportunity to talk to yourself, look in your inner world, your inner universe, and you have time to get to know yourself. So that's mainly I think where the whole project began.
That's very interesting. And I think that what that tells us is looking at external vision of the inner world, which is the slide here, that it tells us about this inner world of yours. And I'm curious, I know that you've been on a series of residencies over the last few years, and one of the, chronologically in this exhibit, we start with this particular slide. And I know that you have mentioned, and we have on the right slide, the city of Carcassonne and how the medieval city really began, I think, began your quest to explore the city and use the city, the walled city, as the focus for this monumental series of paintings. So tell us a little bit about Carcassonne and that experience and how you moved from there.
Well, I think this is a lot of component that have to do with this painting, but this painting is very important in the show because it was a starting point. This painting is the result of what had happened when you like to work in big format and you, because the practical condition of the artist in residency in Paris, I have to do small things. So I was almost 1 year doing a residency in Charlotte for 4 months and another 4 months in Paris. I have to do very, very little drawing and paintings. And then I have the urge to do something really big, like a symphony. And then I have the revelation when I went to this city, Carcassonne. It's a beautiful medieval city. And when you get in, you realize that the whole human society, it happened in there. I mean, they have the church, religious, the faith, the political power, the market, everything. I mean, it was not a global situation in the medieval time when the city was made. So the whole human life happened inside, and people feel protected behind this wall. And then when I get in, I realize how the universe or the social life was at that time. But the interesting thing is when you get out, you can contemplate the whole city, the massive creation, the urban creation of a human being in a very small image. I mean, when you see it from far away. So I have this confrontation between being inside of the human creation, a urban side, and contemplate the massive city from outside. That why is the title external vision of the inner world, because the inner world is that what human create, the projection of our dream, where people live, everything happening inside the walled city. But at the same time, when you get out, you see the whole as a one unit. So that was the first engine for this big painting.
Can we have the next slide?
All right.
Okay, so when I look at this series of works, I think that you have worked in 3 different categories as you've created this exhibit. One is this visionary category that we're going to talk a little bit more about, and then the cosmological and celestial. And I can understand from your explanation how when you look at this city, this enclosed, confined city where everybody lives together, that there is a cosmological resource there that they look to. They look to the sky. And then the third area of this particular exhibit has to do with cities themselves, cities that you've gone to and you have found really inspirational to create works from. So going back to the inner vision of the outer space and this accumulation of imagery, like kaleidoscopic imagery, that you're relating to the slide on the right with the beautiful astronomical clock at Prague. And then we're going to see in a minute your absolute, I wouldn't even call it fascination. I think it's an obsession with clocks. So this painting, Inner Vision of Outer Space, how does that relate to a cosmological vision and clockwork? The clockwork of the stars and the clockwork of reality, our reality.
Well, you are absolutely right about saying obsession, because I say it cannot be another way. Art is an obsession, and it's not a matter of choice. When I did these paintings compulsively, as you can see, there is a lot of work, a lot of time. The 2 first circles, it took me a whole year, entire year doing this painting. And also beside, because it's an oil painting, it takes a long time to get dry. So I have to work in different areas. But I went to bed, wanted to awake next day to go into the painting and do more and see the progress. And there is a general plan of what the paint is going to be, but it's nothing precisely. It's a conversation, and it's something that it happened in the process. Every single detail is a result of an asking a question to the canvas. What I'm going to do beside this shape, what color. It's something that it happened in the brain. This is more for scientific to decipherate how it works. But this painting is the result of the first painting. I was telling before that when I did the first painting, I didn't have in mind the whole project. I just want to do this big explosion of my experience in Europe, also my feelings, my emotion of Carcassonne. All what I have in mind, I put in the first painting. But what had happened is, this is a concept that I just recently took from the documentary art, the art book. When you have the art book inside, it's like a virus. It's like a virus, but in the good sense. It's a virus that inspire yourself to do art and inspire other people, I hope, when they see the artist's art. So when I did the first painting, it wasn't my intention to do this whole series of paintings, but it happened that it gave me idea to do the second painting. So this painting is the sister of that one. And going back to your expression of obsession, I remember when I went to Prague and I saw that clock this fascinating cloud that is in the picture in the right on the left. Uh, so it's a magnetizing. It's something that I want to have that somehow. So my way to have it is doing the painting. So I think it's somehow this is a process of continuity in creation. You think you take things from the legacy and you give your comments, which my comments are my visual language, and then other people get something from there, and you take it in your own way. So that's how this painting happened. And also I want to point out that conceptually, the inner vision of the outer space is the contrary of the other reflection. I mean, the other painting was a contemplation of the human creation, but this one is a contemplation of the universe. So I've been thinking in the relationship between the human being and the universe since very young, and the concept of the infinite. And it's something fascinating that we are in the universe. We are in the middle of infinite, and there is we know very little. And this is I can describe this painting as my approach, my remedy to try to understand this concept of the universe and time and the infinite.
And how human beings relate to the universe and also the city and the structure of the city. But just to interject very briefly, people may not know that you are a consummate collector. You collect everything. And one of the things that you really collect are clock gears and all the mechanisms, which we're going to see in another slide. But when you say that when you saw this clock, I sort of had to giggle, because I know before you saw this clock, you were already collecting all this stuff and fascinated by clocks, right?
I am a legitimate picker. Since I was talking to my wife that since I have conscience, my grandfather blamed me because I was picking everything interesting from the floor, from the street. So I was a picker since I was a child. So everything I'm fascinated about objects because objects contain human energy, human information. There is a lot of psychological information containing in the object. So I connected to objects somehow.
Yes, yes. Can we go to the next slide? The next slide is the called the Citadel. So once again, going back to an actual city that you visited and experienced, and also brings out another aspect of humanity and the reason for the wall and how the walls become animated in your mind. So we talk a little bit about Citadel and Avila.
Well, this piece, I want to point it out that I didn't make a PowerPoint. So I just gave Amaryllis instruction of related the painting with the city that inspired me. So I was surprised actually when I saw the cities and the photos, the relationship with the paintings. Because I want to tell that I didn't use a photo to do the painting. The painting, it was more the emotional process, going to the canvas and working on the canvas, but I didn't look at all the pictures. So I was surprised when I saw this image of Avila, which is fascinating me, the idea of this is a very special piece because it's connecting with my figurative work, my previous work. And I say my new work is more geometric, but it's very interesting metaphorically how the city resembles a human in body and soul. I mean, we all protected by an appearance. We dress, we have an expression, but what is inside, we don't see until we get in contact with just that person. And even the person itself don't know itself because we have a lot of emotion and information that is inside our brain. So this is fascinating, and so I feel connected with those process when I went into the city. I feel like I was getting into the inner universe of a human being. So I was surprised when I saw this aerial view of the city, and what I wanted to do is just a figure that is at the same time a human and it's a city at the same time.
And from here, we're going to go back to this idea in the next slide, Emily, the next slide, the relationship of humanity and the cities and the universe with this really beautiful, beautiful painting called Celeste. There we go. There's the celestial city. Hopefully everybody can see it. Okay, the celestial city and the relationship to the constellations, but also the idea of a celestial city. You're putting the two together. You're putting the sky and the city together. So how did you go about making this painting?
Well, this painting particularly, let me talk about some technical aspects. The previous paintings are the background. They have a lot of drippings and overlaying paintings. And the way I do the paintings is mostly I do pairs. So I stick one canvas to another canvas. So one fabric take the pigment of the other canvas, and that create a superposition of layers. This particular painting, it was one of the few that came up nicely in very few steps, because I like the effect of this, like a atmospheric effect of like the transition between night and day. So when I saw that, I realized that I wanted to do urban planning with constellation. Constellation have been an issue for me during my life, because I never understood really how the constellation work, because there's a lot of fantasy in there. And my theory, I just validate my theory looking into a documentary Netflix about the universe and mystery solved, and scientific were talking about constellation and the visual effect. I mean, constellations were created in ancient time with people observing the universe. But what you can see is the super juxtaposition of light, the celestial bodies, but they can be in very different distance. So if you look at the universe from another planet, for instance, you will see a different constellations. So it's completely imaginary, out to you to make whatever you wish out of the constellation. So my wish was to do, because I was involved in this project of urban and cities, my wish was to do this urban city made out of the stars, and also give another dimension of the cities from the celestial point of view. And also, if you look at the Earth from, I mean, I've never been in outer space, but if you look at Earth from above, you can see a lot of light from the cities, and it's also like a constellation. So I like this idea of making a city out of constellations.
Mm-hmm. And the another detail that is hard to see on the slide, but when you look at these paintings up close, the circles are really quite extraordinary, and the circle within a circle within a circle, and some of them actually look like little planets. They look like where you see the red and other colors that emerge from some of the smaller circles. When you look at them at first, you think you're actually looking through the painting, and then when you get up close, you realize that it's not a hole, it's not relief, but it's really your technique to create so imaginatively this. And so what about the circles? Are those the planets?
Well, about Another technical question about this is that every single dot, every single white dot is made with a stencil and a sponge. So when you get closer, you can see a body of paint. It's not, you don't see the brush stroke because I don't use brushes. Everything, the background is a lot of drippings, and the solid image is printing with a sponge. And you know the sponge has the texture. It's just a wash dish sponge, but you know they have a lot of holes, and the pigment get into the hole. And when you push it into the canvas, you project this pigment into the painting, and you get this body of painting. So it looked like, if you get closer, they're like a planet. And also conceptually, I want to point it out that when I was doing this painting, and all the paintings, it's like getting into a project of constructing the universe or a city. So when I doing a painting, I am the owner of this territory, which is a piece of canvas, and I project my dreams and my ideas, and I am the architect. It's like the moment of being the architect of the universe.
Mm-hmm. And as the architect, as you're building these canvases, because that's exactly what you do with this complicated process, I go back again to this idea of collections and taking the imagery in the celestial city and referring back to the clock and the gears. So can we have the next slide, which is Clock City? There we go. So I think this really makes my point about your collecting and the fascination with gears and clock parts, and how you incorporate these ideas into the Clock City painting, which is another, all the paintings are really beautiful, but this was the painting that we used on the main wall and on the invitation, because it's just so dramatic, and the contrast between the darks and the gold itself. So this fascination with all of these parts, how do you see that fascination in your works? Because they don't just appear in this painting. You've used clocks and gears and boxes and drawings and lots of different things. So where did this was this a childhood fascination? Did somebody give you an old clock? You took it apart?
Clock are my favorite objects in the whole world. And it's not only because this is fascinated the way that it articulates so many pieces together. For me, it's a metaphor of everything. It's a metaphor of the universe. I mean, the universe, what is the universe? The universe is galaxy, planet, constellation, movement. How does that work? It's amazing. We don't know. It's just a comet, planet moving around, floating, gravity. It's so complicated, but we're going, I mean, this is unreachable knowledge. We're going to the planet Earth. Human beings, we are so complex inside. Nature is so complex. I mean, the variety of forms, colors, structure, and functioning. Inside, we have a lot of components that we ignore exist, from molecules, from everything. So for me, the clocks are incredible metaphoric, and they speak a lot to me about how everything works. But you asked me how is something related with my childhood. Definitely, in Cuba, I was raised in Cuba. Children's in my time don't have all the toys that we want, so I have to create my own toys. I mean, if you take a child and you give the choice to invent a toy, or giving him all the toy that he wants, he will choose the toys, of course. But I mean, it was a question of necessity. I didn't have the toys, and I have to invent my own toys. We have a system, very complicated. Maybe we can talk about this. It's a very interesting subject. But children in Cuba at my time have toys only once a year, and you only have three kind of toys: one very good toy, a medium toy, and a any toy. And then there was a lottery system to get numbers to buy these toys. And I was a very innocent child. I didn't know that corruption exists, so I was blaming myself about my bad luck. I never have a good numbers to get a good toys. So that's reinforced the uh, idea of making my own. So imagine a children only three toys a year. You have to keep your toy to meet the next year toys. And what I did was assemble the toy, see how it works inside, take the pieces apart, and create another parallel universe out of this toy. So this is how neat is the mother of invention, and you know, from an eventual situation, it developed a sense of creativity in me. So I'm happy about that.
So looking at the clock parts and the gears, somebody has asked the question, if you use any of your hundreds of little clock parts, I've seen them, I know there are probably thousands, do you use those as, we talked about stencils, do you ever use those gears and those parts as stencils, or are you just using paper stencils?
For this painting particularly, I was using a stencil. So it was like myself. When you do art, you transform in all possible profession in the world. So in this time, I was a watchmaker. I was making my watch or my big clock, and at the same time, it was a city. So it was a mix of two concepts: the clock and the city, related with the dynamic of particular city. As everybody knows, every city have a very personality regarding with time. So I looked through myself to build my clock. So every single piece of this painting is a big painting, is made with an stencil. So I imagine myself when I was doing it like a clockmaker, doing my big clock. Of course, it doesn't gonna work as a mechanical clock, but it's gonna work as an art clock.
a mind clock. Right? Cities of the mind, clock of the mind. So let's look at some examples of the cities. The first one is the imaginable city, where you are inspired by Greece. So can we see that, Emily? The next slide. So here is imaginable city, and on the right is Olympia, and underneath that Delphi. So this obviously is a fascination with archaeological sites and what you see in them, where you actually can, through the archaeological footprint, see your city, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, there is very interesting aspect about this painting, and I think the brain work as pretty much as an iPhone. I mean, a brain is more complicated, but you have applications in your brain. An artist has an application of the fantasy, so that's what I have. So when I went to these places and I have the previous knowledge of history and art history, in my mind, I completely rebuild the whole city. And for instance, Delphi, which is such an important place because it was the oracle, and people come from far away distance to make historical decision based on the oracle, and it made the oracle work. I mean, if you don't believe in the oracle, but it really worked because you take the decision based on what the oracle said to you. So this is about the idea of reconstruction. When you saw great ruins, these fantastic, fascinating cities, there is a lot of information in the construction of the city, in the remaining stones on the floor. I mean, there's mathematics, there's astronomy, philosophy, all this come to me, and that's why I did this. This painting is very complicated painting because all the information of the dots are contained in the center square. I mean, the city is made following the sizes of the circles, the spots in the circle. It's so complicated to see it in this very small scale, but it's about, I think, what my idea about the Greek work, uh, how they work. I mean, it was so precise. It was a kind of knowledge, and I also think historically the Greek antiquity was the platform of the whole knowledge in architecture and mathematics and philosophy, and that was pretty much what this painting is about.
So while we're in Greece, the next slide is Santorini, or Thera, and that is also a very fascinating construction that relates the city to nature. So can we see that slide, the next one? So here, talk about how you, I mean, it's a very interesting story how this city was built. So can you talk about that a little bit? And you can see it quite nicely on the slide on the right.
Well, this is a very beautiful and fascinating city of the Greek antiquity, because it was a mountain and a volcano erode, and they made this shape. So the volcano is still alive. It's just sleeping. And for me, it was fascinating to the connection between nature and this particularly the dramatic side of nature. I mean, when the volcano explode, it covered all the island, and it created shape of inner theater or something like that. So the rock of the city is volcanic, and people made all these dwellings, and they painted on white. They're it's a very beautiful scenario looking through to the sea. That's why the painting, the center, is like a circle, sort of propeller that is turning around, and around this activity is all these little windows randomly placed around the center.
Oh, the center of the volcano.
Yeah.
So let's see. We don't have very much time left, so let's go to Istanbul next. And I think this sort of speaks for itself, where you're getting a lot of these ideas, and another extraordinary city, even today, the remnants of which are so interesting, with the patterns and the colors that you capture in the painting you call Sanctuary City.
Well, Istanbul, Turkey in general, make a very deep impact on me, because it's a country, and in particular Istanbul, it's a lot of layer of history. It's fascinating when you see the remaining, the traces of history, and then you can imagine what was going on related with the development of the humanity. And a very fascinating thing for me, when you get into the mosque, the spirituality translated into light, shapes, and color is amazing. So you just have to transport yourself in the time when the city was everything, and it was a pretty much rural war, and this was like going to another dimension. So that was my inspiration to do this painting, the sanctuary city.
Wonderful. And the last slide is going to take us to the United States of America, and Savannah, a city that probably many people don't realize has quite an interesting plan, and that is built on grids and parks. So I know that you've spent some time in the South and doing a residency, especially in North Carolina. So when you came upon Savannah, did it strike you immediately as being something unique?
I discovered Savannah in my way to my residency in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I was fascinated because first it's a urban, beautiful design, and but the aspect of they have so many parks, it bring me back to my childhood. I was brought in the old Havana Plaza de Armas, where they have a big park, and that was a very important place for me in my childhood, where I met uh, old people. They tell me stories, so I think it took me back on time when I went to this city. It's so beautiful, and I went one when in my way to Charlotte. And then when I came back, I stayed longer, and every single square have a personality. So it's a lot of personality. It's a compound of mystery and architecture. Beautiful houses together. So I did this painting, which was the last one of this show. But I have more cities in my mind to waiting for.
That was going to be my
So,
next question. What cities are going to come along? Well, I think we're right on time. I'm going to turn it over to Jody because I know we have a lot of people waiting to ask questions.
Yes,
Jody,
thank you.
wanna...
Thank you so much, Dr. Damian and Carlos. Carlos, I'm going to invite everyone to use the chat feature to type in your questions, which I will read for them to answer and for everyone to hear. And you're welcome to put your videos back on, but please leave your microphones on mute, everyone else. But while everyone is typing, Carlos, we'd love to see what you're working on now. Will you show us some of your studio and some of your tools back there?
sure.
This is the fun part, going into the artist.
I'm working in too many different things. This situation of the pandemic changed everybody's mind. It was very unexpected. So I don't know why I start to do a tarot cards installation. It's going to be an interactive installation, and I think maybe I'm very interested in the psychological aspect of tarot cards. Tarot cards are a compendium of the human mind. Everything is related with us, and so every card is a question or is also an answer at the same time. So I'm working on that. It's going to be a big installation where the viewer can participate and they can make they will get a graphic. It's also relating with the cosmos, because the reading is pretty much about constellation. It's complicated, but I'm gonna show you around. This is my working table. This is my conference station. Of course, I don't. This is just a tower for holding the phone. So this is my studio here. And I have too many things. What you can see on the floor, this plastic cans, is for a project that I am in conversation with some people from art in public places that want to do artworks on the subway here in Miami. And I always wanted to do puppet theater performance. And so this is for making puppets. This is some of my telephones that are gonna be on exhibit, and I'm supposed to have an exhibit here in Charlotte in May, but because the situation is postponed to March. So this is going to be some of the work. This is another piece related with time. It's called the timekeeper. I don't know if I have the telephone in the right position. So this is a new work. This is called the collectionateurs, about relationship between things that we collect and our personal inner world. This is another table. This is another of the telephone. This is for shaving my beard when this is end. This is another beautiful doll. This is the tarot cards. So this is the cards, and it's gonna be 89 cards displayed on the wall in a sort of solar system, and it's very complicated piece.
Can you hold one up for us, closer to the camera? It's really far away. Sorry, I'm being really nosy.
Okay. All right. This is one. I don't know if I am in the right position.
It's cut off a little bit. Hold it a little higher.
Higher?
There you go. Perfect.
All right. Okay.
So what's that one?
This is another clock. So those are the cards. It's in progress. It's work in progress. This is my studio.
Great. Thank you for doing that. I think there are some other questions, so I'm going to let
all right.
them. I see that Don wants to know if you can elaborate briefly on mentioning your several layers of canvases. I guess how you superimpose one on top of the other to create the piece. Can you re-explain how you press them together, or how your process on that?
Well, all right. So first, I want to explain why I do that. The concept behind the process. In old Havana, my childhood place where I grew up, all the buildings have this patina of time. I mean, there is not one flat color. There's a lot of color overlapping, and for me that was very dramatically, visually, because it's like a expression of the human drama. When you see a white wall, you cover history. You cover a human stain. So I like this overlapping of different shapes and colors and shades, and that's why I do a lot of drapings. I prepare different pigments. For me, it's like doing a movie. And first, you have to configure the background of where you're gonna play the movie and where the character's gonna play. So what I do is a lot of drippings. As I mentioned before, I use several canvas at the same time, and I stick it one to another, and then one canvas get the pigment of another. So it gives you the sensation of a very old fresco, like a Roman ruins or the Egyptian paintings on the walls. And that's the idea of the background. So I want to create a very dramatic scenario where the background is also a character of the performance. And then I come with the shapes or the figures or the characters or whatever I'm gonna do on top.
That's great. Since you talked about texture, we had another question sort of about the texture and the pattern. A question says, as a quilter, I see quilt and textile patterns in several of your paintings. Did textiles influence your works at all?
Oh, definitely. I went, I think, at the beginning of 2000, one of my favorite museums in the world is the Museum of the Medieval Age in Paris, where they have this big tapestry. And for me, it's amazing the articulation of colors and shape and the waving. For me, it's very objectual artwork. Yes, I'm very influenced of the textile, and also I use pattern from the paper paper cloths, those that you use in that's something that I started to use in Paris 2003 in another artist in resident program, and I just discovered the beautiful pattern of the paper towels. So I printed, and you know they're very spongy and they absorb the pigment and they left the trace of the drawing behind. So I created a juxtaposition of design. That's something that fascinates me.
Wow, that's really, I will not look at my paper towels the same way. We also have a question, if they want to know if you have any architectural background.
My father is an engineer. So I always say that it's always something behind everything. And my father is an engineer, and I grew out in his office looking for his tool and all this. Actually, my table is a architecture table, and mostly of my friends are either art historian, art critic, but scientific, but mainly architects. So I get a lot of point of view from the architects.
Great.
And also my father's dream was for me to be an architect. And then he was very disappointed when I started to study art. But I convinced him that I may use the painting skill for architect. But I did just the opposite, and he was happy at the end. So.
Well, we're happy that you went this route for sure. So we have a comment, your work is so beautiful and interesting. Thank you for sharing this with all of us. It looks like you work in several different media as an artist. Do you have a favorite?
I love to draw. I cannot stay. This is like a peacemaker for me. I need a pen and a paper. So I always carry a notebook. I like to draw my ideas because, you know, it's like a hunter. I think Charles Chaplin says something about that. Artists are a hunter of ideas. And for me to have a notebook is a way to hunt for this idea. Once you have it, you can elaborate later, but it's important to get it, because you know the brain, the short-term memory is very fragile and you forget things. So I have a lot of notebooks everywhere. Since I was a student, I have notebooks, so it's a kind of workshop for me where I storage my thinking and my memories and everything passing through my mind. I put it on my notebooks, and even it's something not so pleasant, but when I go to sleep and I get into this state that the conscience is very relaxed, I got a lot of ideas. So I have to turn the lamp off and on and start writing.
So you keep a sketchbook by your bed? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I have a sketchbook everywhere. It's like my life pill. I need it, because otherwise I will lose ideas. So going back to the original question, my favorite medium is to draw. I love to draw.
So that sort of leads me to another question that I had. I love seeing the pictures of you at the actual cities that inspired your work, that in Cities of the Mind. How long did you spend there in each site, and did you actually make sketches on site?
No, not really. It's my mind who made the storage of memories and emotion, and I have my notebooks in case I need to write down some very specific idea. I have a largest notebook at the hotel or where the place I was staying, and then when I go back, I make like a diary of my memories.
Wow, so truly Cities of your Mind. Amazing. Some other questions. I know we're sort of short on time, but I want to try to get to as many as we can. The Olympia archaeological site, they want to know what crossed your mind when you were making that piece. I don't know if you can explain that.
What crossed my mind when I was making which piece?
the archaeological, the Greece one, not the not Thera, but the.
I am a fan of Greek philosophy and Greek culture in general. So that was it was. I think it's not the best way to pay my debt. It's like you have to do something with what obsesses to your mind. So great philosopher has been a very important source of inspiration, because it contained all the thinking and all the aesthetic and all the projection of the society of that time. So I was trying to do something about it with that painting. It was in my mind. That was in my mind.
Great. Thank you for answering all these amazing questions.